Today's energy management tip is about keeping the inner child present. This is an interesting expression and experience, and one that we don't often think to do. Usually, the relationship with the inner child is something that we need to engage quite consciously and quite deliberately. But this is a slightly different way of dealing with the inner child and bringing it into our day-to-day activities and so on. So I'd like to just start off by discussing a little bit about what the inner child actually is, and from there we can move into understanding the different ways in which we stimulate it, including keeping the inner child present with us. So what is the inner child? Well, it is an aspect of us that remains in innocence and is often perceived as being very childlike. The inner child is also the filter for all of our emotional experience. So the inner child is capable of causing absolute chaos if it is neglected and ignored, and can also become incredibly overindulgent if there is too much attention and no boundaries in place. So the inner child is best understood as this aspect of us that remains in innocence and filters all of our emotion as a summary. When we stimulate the inner child, we need to engage it through balance. That balance means that there needs to be equal parts of work and play. We need to be productive and feel like productive members of society. And we also need to be able to rest and actually enjoy life. Too much of either thing will create an imbalance, and the inner child will respond in a non-positive way. So we do that by making sure that in our daily activities we have both work and play. But the inner child also thrives on creativity, and it also thrives on childlike engagement and self-nurturing. Now, the last point is the one I want to mention to you today, or to talk about in a bit of greater depth. If we look at the inner child in terms of its creative stimulation, this can be any kind of spontaneous creative engagement that the inner child seeks. We can paint, draw, dance, drum, it doesn't matter. The more spontaneous the creativity, the happier the inner child. The innocent, childlike playfulness that it seeks is also quite easily accessible, and includes things like baking mud cakes, jumping in puddles, lying on your back and making shapes out of the clouds, being childlike and innocent in our engagement. And the final way that I mentioned that I'd like to expand on today is working with the inner child through self-nurturing, which enables us to keep the inner child present always. Something that most people don't associate with self-nurturing is the absence of self-judgment. Self-judgment is the antithesis of self-nurturing, and when it is in our space or we engage it, we not only sabotage ourselves, we close our hearts to ourselves, and we isolate our inner child. So with the process or the experience of self-nurturing through an absence of self-judgment, it means that we need to keep our hearts open to ourselves every day in all of our actions and accept ourselves pretty much unconditionally. That means that if you lose your temper in the traffic, or you start swearing at pedestrians, or just generally behaving very humanly, that you don't beat yourself up for it afterwards because it's perceived as a non-spiritual form of behavior, but rather the greater spiritual practice is in accepting our humanness and learning how to be with it in a self-loving way. Now, the interesting thing is that when we practice this, we actually bring the inner child into our constant daily activities. And when the inner child is present through the absence of self-judgment and through the presence of self-acceptance, there is a playfulness which is literally just behind every experience that we have, and at any moment can be brought forward and brought into our engagements. It's not an inner child that is completely out of control and wants to laugh hysterically at inappropriate times, but rather is an inner child that is playful and humorous and present in our engagements, even the ones that we're taking seriously. It's not interfering, it's balanced, and it's harmonized. It helps us to take some of the experiences that we have in our lives, which can be quite challenging, and deal with them from a lighter position rather than from this heavy kind of self-judgment role. So today's energy management tip is less about managing energy in a literal sense and more about engaging self-nurturing as the absence of self-judgment. So become aware of when you judge yourself and why you judge yourself. What are the things that cause you to feel less? And then utilizing whatever avenues you have available to you, just let them go. Whether that is to visit a healer, whether it is to do a process for yourself, whether it is to work with the earth, whatever tools you have available to you, utilize them and relinquish these patterns. The most, shall we say, habitual manifestation of self-judgment comes from our relationship with the world around us and what we think other people think of us. I have news for you, and this is probably the most important thing you're ever going to hear. The only opinion that counts is your own. It doesn't matter what other people think. What counts is what you think, what you feel. When we allow other people, our perceptions of what they think of us, to influence us, we are not only giving our power away, but we are allowing other people to determine who we are going to be in the world. That is a power that should be held with both hands every day of your life, never allowing another person's opinion or your perception of their opinion to dictate who you're going to be, what you say, and how you perceive things. I hope that this brings you a little bit closer to self-acceptance and self-love, which truly are extraordinary ways of being and really are manifestations of consciousness for us as human beings. So thank you once again for listening, and I leave you with love. Thank you.